Once you've been through the child find process and your child has been evaluated and found eligible for special education and related services, and you have an IEP meeting and a plan's developed and your child is doing well in school or maybe needs some help, additional help, but at any rate, the question really is, when does a reevaluation come about? At a minimum, a reevaluation has to occur every 3 years. So there will be a reevaluation every 3 years if your child's in special education. It can be more often than that if you feel that you're seeing some problems in meeting the annual goals and you think it may be related to a disability, or you talk to your doctor or medical provider and they've seen some additional conditions that they hadn't seen before. You may want to ask for another evaluation. The school may see the same thing. They may have some concerns and ask for an evaluation. So that can occur, and so they can be sooner than the 3-year minimum time frame. Also, it can't be more than once a year unless both the school and you, the parent, agree. So then you go ahead and have a reevaluation. You'll be notified of this. It's a notification and consent for reevaluation. And we have a copy of that form that you can take a look at so you know what's coming in the mail. Also, you may not get that because if nothing has changed and your child still qualifies and they've gathered some information, you will get what's called a notice of no additional information needed, essentially to qualify for special education and related services. It'll list all the reasons why they believe your child qualifies and there's not a necessity for another full-blown evaluation. Take a look at that form also. And those are the two forms. From here, we're going to go straight into the Code of Federal Regulations and explain to you a little bit there about reevaluation. 34 Code of Federal Regulations 300.303 is the Code of Federal Regulations for reevaluations. Reevaluations are done. School must ensure that they're done when the school thinks that one is necessary for the child, or if you as a parent request a reevaluation for your child. Let's say, for example, you got another report back from the doctor that came out a little different than what the team was thinking before. That may be a reason for a reevaluation. There may be other reasons, but if either the school or you decide that there needs to be a reevaluation, then one is started. But at a minimum, they must occur at least once every 3 years. It's what's called the 3-year reeval. So every 3 years there has to be a reevaluation. Other than that, it's by request of the school or you, the parent. There is another limitation here that it may not have a reevaluation more than once a year unless the parent and the school agree. The reason for this was parents were asking for repeated reevaluations, one right after the other. Really, your remedy there is if you disagree with the school's evaluation, you ask for an independent educational evaluation, an IEE. When the reevaluation is started, we went through this on evaluations also, but this particular section involves reevaluations, so we're going to go through it one more time. The team needs to review existing evaluation data, including information provided by the parents of the child. They must review any assessments and classroom-based observations and observations by teachers and related service providers. So you get the input from the teachers, from the physical therapist, occupational therapist, other providers, and you also observe the child in the classroom. Then the team identifies what additional data is necessary, if any, to determine whether the child continues to have a disability and educational needs. Present levels of academic achievement are taken into consideration, and then it's determined whether the child needs special education related services, whether any other additions or modifications are necessary to meet the annual goals. In gathering all this data, there does not have to be a meeting necessarily. There can be, but it's not required. If there's no additional data necessary, it's not needed, then the public agency notifies the parents that the child either qualifies or does not qualify and the reasons why they qualify or do not qualify. They also inform the parents of the right to request an assessment to determine whether the child continues to be a child with a disability. But if the parent determines that they're fine with their child being qualified without additional information and testing, then they just agree to it. Now, if the school does decide that your child is eligible and doesn't need any additional information, then great. For example, if your child has a hearing loss to the point where they're considered deaf, they will continue to be considered deaf, and so there's no need for additional information. If the agency changes the eligibility, that is, your child was eligible and is no longer eligible, then the agency must evaluate additionally in order to ensure that this child is no longer a child with a disability. The only time they're exempt from that is when the child graduates or ages out according to state law, which would be 19 in Nebraska. But generally, unless they're graduating, then they have to do an evaluation prior to exiting special education. If the child is graduating, there's also some information here that needs to be provided to the parents. That is the rules and regulations on reevaluation. Now that you know how that works, to sum it up pretty much, needs to be at a minimum every 3 years. If you or the school thinks it needs to be sooner, then it needs to be sooner.